Welcome back to the agenda. So according to the latest crime statistics, road rage is a growing concern in South Africa. Increasing road rage numbers contributed to 17,316 assault with intent to commit grievous bodily harm cases in a period of just 3 months. The first quarter crime statistics indicated that 6,424 murders reported were due to arguments, misunderstanding, provocation, and road rage, also leading to 997 attempted murder cases. That's a lot at this time of the year when there is noticeably high levels of intoxication among road users. One can only presume that incidents of road rage will spike. So let's talk a little bit about road rage. We speak now to clinical psychologist Khosi Jiyane about how to avoid being a victim of road rage. A good morning to you, and thank you so much for giving us your time. I actually just want to go through what you make of whether or not this is a big problem in the country, and what it says about, I suppose, the emotions that South Africans carry around with them.
Yeah, good morning and thank you, and festive greetings to all our audience. It definitely is a staggering statistic that you've just shared with us. And I think all of us should really sit up and take heed of that, because it speaks to the collective psyche of the country. And as much as we are focusing, in a sense, now on the festive season, but it speaks to the general climate of the country, where we have high levels of intolerance, high levels of stress. And we can then imagine, just taking that from the bigger context, that as we talk about the festive season, and it's ironical that we are using the words festive and rage in the same sentence, right? So it suggests that, people have been working, the burden of work, and people have been really planning and looking forward to getting away, as it were. And people have a fixed idea in their minds about how this trip is going to turn out. And of course, many a times people don't factor in what could go wrong in between. And therefore, because people are highly strung, in a sense, psychologically and emotionally, the chances of things going wrong are multiplied. But it's not so much the incidents that happen as much as it is about how we react to those incidents. That's really at the heart of what we talk about in terms of road rage.
Yeah, I want to talk about that point that you're making. It's not really about what happens, but it's about how we react, right? Where we've seen cases of road rage in the country, honestly, get, quite astronomical and very concerning. Does that say that there simply isn't enough, I suppose, mental support for South Africans who find themselves under a lot of pressure? That even in our own communities, there isn't a lot of support to say, if you're under pressure, this is the place where you can go, so that you don't, let off steam at the first person that upsets you.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to try to shy away from the victim mentality of seeing ourselves as victims, because it is us who create these things, in a sense. So I think there isn't enough thinking through in the moment. And I think there isn't enough just general coping resources when people are overwhelmed by a number of things. And it could be that by the end of the year, things have come to a head, as it were, and where it takes just one small incident, because many a times you may find that the incident itself was so small in proportion to the reaction, and how things have escalated like a fire and get out of control, simply because how people are then wired and how people will then deal with that. One of the problems, Naledi, is how people will come from a sense of, I am right, you are wrong. And therefore, I will make you pay. There's a sense of justice that you either deliberately have done this, or if it was a mistake, the potential vulnerability or the potential accident it could have caused. So people will come from a reaction, a defensive reaction, where the brain is in fight, flight, or freeze mode at the time. And at that time, the higher thinking centers of the brain have shut down, and we really are coming from our lower reptilian defense mechanisms, which aren't the best to deal with such an overwhelming situation.
I must say, I quite like what you said about wanting to step away from the victim mentality, because that says that we can be accountable for ourselves, which in my view gives us a lot of power over ourselves.
Indeed.
I really enjoy that. So what then how do we exercise that power and that accountability for ourselves in a moment like that, when you're on the road, you've got your kids in the back of the car, you've promised them a brilliant holiday, and on the road something goes wrong? What do you do to hold on to yourself?
So I think one of the things we need to do is to anticipate that things will go wrong. So don't cut your trip too fine that it's going to take me 5 hours to get to Durban. If I calculate, if I move at 120, it's going to take me this, because you're cutting it too precise. And therefore, what that says is that there isn't enough margin of error. Right. And so we need to extend that horizon and think differently about it. I remember a couple of years ago, there was a slogan that said, why are you rushing to get to a place that's not going anywhere? Durban is not going, or your destination is not going anywhere, right? You will get there.
Yeah.
So slower is faster in that sense, right? So plan that. And secondly, anticipate that there will be. We are all perfectly imperfect. I don't for a moment think there's anybody who goes out of their way to say, I'm going to make everybody on the road miserable. So it's either it's going to be a mistake, an error of judgment, all of which we are all susceptible to. All of us are perfectly imperfect. We will make errors of judgment.
Yeah.
And to expect that those things will happen. And when those happen, it is, how do I turn myself? How do I control myself? Because that's the only thing I can control, is how I deal with it. Whichever side of the equation that I'm on, whether I'm the one who was right in that incident, one of the things I use personally is to say, when somebody makes a mistake, and I do this all the time, when somebody makes a mistake, I always say to myself, when do I also make a mistake?
I quite like
because
that.
then that calms me down. You know, I don't come from an upper hand or the pedestal of perfection. It also says, just like me, they are human. It just happens to be them and not me at this particular time who has made a mistake. You know, and therefore, what place of humanity and the humane way can I deal with this? And once the first place to go is to work on myself, so that I can then control how I behave towards that incident, rather than being in a reaction to that situation.
Yeah.
One of the things we also have to factor in is that, festive season, there's a lot of indulgence. People are much more indulgent now than they are during the year. And so therefore, the chances of alcohol and a whole lot of other substances that may come into the picture are quite high, which is what we need to factor into how we plan that trip, making room for all those things, because then it means we can anticipate it and we can then think through how we are going to deal with it, rather than being in effect of it as an unexpected thing that we didn't anticipate.
Yeah, when we know what the situation really is looking like at the moment, at this time of the year. I want to take advantage of having you with us and just to squeeze in one last question to digress a little bit. 2022 is one of those years where we have been pressured to get back on the horse after 2020 and 2021 really took the wind out of us. And now there's a lot of pressure for 2023 to be a better year. How do we, give us some tips perhaps on how to walk into 2023 a little bit more clearer, with a little bit more intent or optimism, whichever you choose?
I think intent is the most important, because that then sets, a guiding light for each one of us. Intent is important, while we also anticipate that we are still navigating the waves of change, right? We are still in some form of hybridity. Organizations are still trying to figure out, but it is important to create a center for yourself. And that is why, as much as there's something to be said about, the cliche of resolutions and so on, resolutions in one sense are important because it says, who do I want to become? How do I want to walk into? And of course, it's not going to be perfect, but you rather have set some intention, given it some thought, rather than just going with the flow, of things, which then can throw you off course. It's important for us to be intentional about what we want to achieve, to review the path that we have walked and to say, what new path and what footprints do I want to make for myself as I enter into the new space? So we need to be deliberate, about who we are, make plans, not just dreams, but make plans, and rather falter within a plan than just, to waddle in a way that is undeliberate in how we engage in our lives, just generally.
Yeah.
That would be my take.
Yeah, be deliberate about what you create in the new year. Thank you so much for speaking to us. An absolute pleasure. Enjoy the holidays and have yourself a wonderful entry into 2023 as well.
Thank you, and awesome one to you and to all the listeners out there.
Wonderful. That there, clinical psychologist Khosi Jiyane, talking to us about how to stay calm as we deal with traveling over the festive season. We know that road rage numbers, and particularly assault, attempted murder and murder numbers are spiking around this time of the year because of road rage, and also giving us a little bit to think about as we enter the new year.